Hi class, now so far we've been talking to you about the annual maintenance that you're going to need to be doing to your citrus tree regularly. We've covered irrigation, fertilization, and pruning, and the final thing in your annual maintenance that you want to pay attention to is weed control and mulching. Now remember, this is annual maintenance. This is a long-term investment, as Chris mentioned, and if you don't do things on a regular basis to keep your tree healthy, it's going to provide for you and you're going to be happy with it probably for a couple of years, and then you're going to be calling us and say, what's wrong with my tree? Well, if you do the annual maintenance, you're not going to be calling us because you're going to be happy. Now, weed control and mulching. Now here, we want to go from something like this. I mean, you can see the citrus tree back here, and of course, there's all this weed growth going underneath it. And then, okay, now the weed growth has been removed and there's kind of, good weed control. But the next step is definitely you want to do the mulching, because this is a big important part of weed control and moisture control under your citrus tree. And a lot of times you'll see in the orchards for commercial growers, they don't come through and do the mulching. But remember, we're addressing you, the backyard orchard for the homeowner. This is really nice to do this. So, weed control. Why do you want to do weed control? Well, one thing, of course, the weeds are going to be competing with your citrus tree for the water and the nutrients. So when you're out there adding fertilizer and out there irrigating your tree, if you got weeds under there, they're going to be thanking you for it, and they're probably going to grow a lot faster than your citrus tree. So, get rid of that competition, get rid of the weeds. And also, the weeds can be hosts for insects and disease-causing organisms. A lot of the insects and a lot of the disease-causing organisms might be able to grow and survive on weeds growing under your tree. And of course, the more weeds you have, the more insects you're going to come having in there to hide and to find places to mate and to do all kinds of things. So getting rid of the weeds helps to cut down on your disease and insect problems. And of course, I like this one, weeds are unsightly. Now, isn't this a much nicer picture to have in your backyard than something like this? So, weeds are unsightly. Now, how do you do weed control? Well, one good method is hand pulling or some other type of mechanical removal. By that I mean you can hoe them out or use a spade to remove the ones with really deep roots. So that's one way of getting rid of the weeds. Another is using herbicides. And when you get herbicides, make sure you read and follow the labels precisely in using your herbicides. Now, herbicides can be a good way of getting rid of weeds under your trees. And of course, now you want to realize that an herbicide that's going to get rid of the weeds is going to affect your tree if it's a young tree or the bark of the tree is green. That means it's active and alive and growing. If you get herbicide on the green part of the tree, it's going to take the herbicide in and you can even kill your tree. So herbicides are a good way of controlling weeds, but you have to know what you're doing and you have to follow the label directions precisely. However, in the backyard, doing the hand pulling and mulch. Combination of those is a really good way to control the weeds, to get rid of the weeds, and you don't need to resort to the herbicides. So, mulch is a really good way to prevent weeds under your tree. Now, what about mulching? Why do you want to mulch? Okay, we just mentioned weed control. That's one really big reason for getting your tree mulched well each year. Another is moisture retention. Now, if you have bare soil surface under the tree, the watering from the rain or from your irrigation is going to evaporate much faster from the soil. The soil is going to dry out faster. A good layer of mulch under the tree will help to prevent that evaporation, and what water the soil has will last longer there and be available for your tree. Mulch can also modulate the soil temperature, and of course that's based on the color of the mulch. If you have a bright colored mulch, this would be something like shredded newspaper, which does make a good mulch, or anything bright in color is going to reflect the light the sunlight, and the soil underneath will stay cooler. Now, if you're growing in an area where you really want the soil to stay warm, then use a darker colored mulch. This is a dark colored mulch. So you can even play with your mulches, since you may want to mulch definitely more than once per year, is in the winter time, you might want to use a dark colored mulch so that any sunlight hitting the soil, the dark colored mulch will help to retain that heat, and it will go into the soil and the soil will stay warmer. In the summertime, when the sun's getting really nice and bright, shiny and heavy, you might want to use a light colored mulch, because then the soil around the roots will stay cooler. So mulch can help you to modulate your soil temperature. And for tree protection, now what do I mean by that? Well, if you're using a weed whacker to help get rid of the weeds, that's a mechanical way of getting rid of the weeds, or you're mowing underneath your tree, and you got your trunk here, or even as the tree gets larger like this, and you have to get rid of the weeds and the grass up near the trunk. Let's face it, occasionally you might be whistling your favorite tune when you're mowing or weed whacking, not quite paying attention to what you're doing, and you end up weed whacking the trunk of your tree or running into it with the lawnmower. Once you've done that, you've wounded the tree, created a wound. Now the tree is going to have to heal. It's going to be a little stress for a while. Plus it's an open wound and an invitation to insects and diseases. By using mulch around the tree, now your weed whacking and mowing can stay well away from the trunk of the tree, and you're not going to damage. So mulching is also a way of protecting your tree. And aesthetics. Like the first slide showed you, that weedy tree doesn't look very nice. Getting rid of the weeds under the tree, that looks much better. But when you put a nice mulch around the tree, that really looks nice. Now, how do you mulch? Well, if you want to get the full benefits of the mulch, it's very important to have between a 3-inch and a 4-inch deep layer of mulch. If you have less than 3 inches of mulch around the tree, there are some weeds that are going to say, hey, great, you're holding moisture in the soil for me, and I'm going to grow right through that mulch. Plus, if you get really thin layer of mulch, 1 inch or so, now you're not going to be retaining the moisture as well, and you're going to have a lot of weeds grow through the mulch. So it's very important to have the right depth of mulch. Now, why did we put an upper limit on the level of mulch? Well, if you get the mulch too deep, now the tree may start to grow roots into that mulch layer. And so it'll start to develop feeder roots. It'll start looking for moisture and nutrients in the mulch layer. And then if the mulch dries out a little bit, or there's no nutrients available in the mulch, the tree is going to suffer. So just keep a 3 to 4 inch layer of mulch around your tree, and that'll be perfect. And over here, we're showing you the difference between good mulching and bad mulching. This is the correct way to mulch. Now you see in this, they got a nice round, circular area that's covered with mulch, but right near the trunk, they don't mulch right up against the trunk of the tree. Because if you pile your mulch up against the trunk of the tree, you can create an avenue for fungus and other pathogens to invade the trunk of the tree. This is definitely wrong. You do not want to pile your mulch up against the tree. It's commonly called volcano mulching. And this one, they've come and the mulch layer is way too deep. It's piled up against the trunk of the tree. So now this little tree here is going to start putting roots out this way. It'll create a moisture barrier for insects to come in, for disease to come in. Just take our word for it. Mulching like this is only going to cause problems. Mulch the correct way. And you want to replenish your mulch on a regular basis. Now down in our area, the mulch that you put down in the spring is not going to stay 3 to 4 inches deep for a full year. Because if you're using organic mulch, it's going to break down. It's going to increase the organic component in your soil, which is a good thing, but as that mulch breaks down, the layer gets thin, and it's no longer going to be able to prevent weeds and to retain moisture. So on a regular basis, check your mulch around your trees to make sure you're maintaining a 3 to 4 inch deep layer of mulch. And as I mentioned, you can use organic mulch, which is really nice. As it breaks down, it's going to improve the soil. Now, if you go with artificial mulches, they're not going to break down, and they will work for you. And so they will last longer, but they're not going to improve the soil the way organic mulches will. And if you don't get our Geno Gardening newsletter, you can email us and get copies of it, but you can go online and find the January 2018 issue of Geno Gardening. And in that article, in that edition, we got lots of good articles on mulch and mulching, the different types of mulch, how long they'll last, what they're good for as far as the color and everything. So this is a great resource, and it's going to be in the resources section just below this video. So it's easy access, and you can find out more about mulching there. So now we've gone through planting your tree. You've got it in the ground, it's growing, you did good things to keep the soil in good shape, you prepared it properly, and so now you've planted your tree, it's growing, and you're looking forward to the fruit. Remember, the annual maintenance. That's important. Annual maintenance. So, with that, get out there, plant that tree, and look for a fruitful harvest.